It's Monday, the 26th of March 2018. I'm Russ McLean, Chair of the Patient Voices Group, and today I'm in conversation with Mr. Kevin McGee, Chief Executive Officer of East Lancashire Hospitals Trust, an acute trust which provides healthcare to a population of over 560,000 patients across Pennine, Lancashire. And today I'm at one of its sites, the Royal Blackburn Teaching Hospital, which is one of the busiest emergency departments in the Northwest. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Russ.
Now, today, like trusts the length and breadth of the country, East Lancashire Hospitals Trust, or ELHT, has failed to meet the 4-hour target, which means that patients are seen, treated, admitted or discharged in under 4 hours, 95% of the time. Now, we talk about your emergency department at each of our meetings. You're failing those targets. Is it time to admit defeat and move that percentage target, as happened in 2010, when the target was 98% of patients?
Well, I think 95% is a fair target, and I think we should continue to try and strive for 95%, and certainly that's our objective with the work that we're doing. We are actually, by some way, the largest ED department and emergency department in the Northwest. So on average, we will have about 130 ambulance conveyances per day. The next biggest units are less than 100, round about sort of late 90s. So by some considerable factor, we are the biggest ED. It has been incredibly busy over the last few months, and as you say, we've not been hitting the target. But even when patients have to queue for longer than we would hope, and sometimes patients have been on corridors, queuing on corridors, we always put nursing staff to manage those patients and look after those patients and care both for their clinical and just general needs. So I would always hope that patients are cared for, even if they have longer waits than would be expected. We are doing a lot of work to improve the position. We're trying to recruit more doctors and nurses to work in our ED and urgent care departments. We're actually doing a big physical expansion of our ED department, and we've just been granted 10 million to improve the physical capacity that we have. But it really is a big problem because we have a very, very busy department. There are times when it gets very overcrowded, such as this weekend. And unfortunately, this weekend we had a large number of mental health patients who were awaiting mental health beds in the ED department. That was because of the pressures that mental health services were under. So you can see we work as part of a system. We don't stand alone. And when other parts of that system are under pressure, that can put pressure on us, as was seen this weekend.
You referred just a moment ago to this weekend, and I've come back from holiday today to a message from a lady who tells me that she was waiting for 7 hours on a corridor to be seen. So she rang 111, she'd had a dizzy spell, she fell at home, no one to look after the child, 111 sent an ambulance, but she ended up on a hospital corridor for 7 hours. Is that right?
That is not right, and I apologise. Unfortunately, as I said, there are times when our physical capacity can just not cope with the number of patients who need to access the service. So occasionally we get patients who do have to wait on corridors. However, we do put nurses on the corridors to look after those patients, to support those patients and to care for those patients. So even if the physical capacity is not enough, I would still hope that the care was appropriate.
Now, this lady was said to have recovered enough herself to have discharged herself because her son, her 5-year-old son, who was with her, needed to go home. So, good news for her, she was recovered enough to go home.
It is good news, and we have to ask that, and I keep repeating this statement, ED is only for patients who actually need ED. Of course, if patients phone 111 and 111 advise that they need to be conveyed to hospital by ambulance, you have to, and you should follow that advice. But we still do get patients turning up inappropriately as well into ED.
So a significant number of people who actually attend the A&E department could in fact get treatment elsewhere.
I think that's absolutely the case, and if you think about the various levels of treatment, clearly there's self-care, there's going to pharmacists, there's going to GPs, there's looking at 111 centres, calling 111. There's also going into urgent treatment and minor injuries units, all before you try and access an ED department. And I would ask people to really think very long and hard before using an ED, because generally you will have a long wait. And if you don't need to be there, it should only be for the people who absolutely need that specialist care.
And as you said to me before, you will actually be seen according to your clinical need. So if, for instance, you turn up with you've fallen, and then someone turns up with a heart attack, the heart attack patient will obviously be seen first.
That has to be the case, and we would never deviate from that. Everything that we do through emergency care is based on clinical need and clinical assessment.
Health experts from the Nuffield Trust are saying that tight spending in recent years and increasing demand for services have been taking a mounting toll on patient care. They add that there's growing evidence that access to some treatments is being rationed and that quality of care in some services is being diluted. Is that something that you recognise at ELHT?
It's something I absolutely do not recognise. Clearly we have pressures on budgets, the same as every hospital, and we try and use our resources wisely. But we're still hitting all our standards, quality standards and performance targets other than the ED that we've just talked about. And that issue in terms of ED is not really about money, it's about the availability of staff and physical capacity. But all of our other clinical standards and operational standards we are delivering against.
We refer a lot to winter pressures, and obviously that's continuing. The cold snap is certainly continuing. How many extra beds did you make available over the winter period, and will those beds remain open?
Well, of course, they said, and the joke is, but it's not a joke, that the worst winter crisis the NHS has ever had was last summer. And that is the case because, flows are continuous now, and the capacity that we've opened, and we've opened additional wards, the capacity continues to remain open. Now, I would hope that some of the things we opened for winter and some of the additional beds that we've just recently opened, we can close down in the next few weeks. But at this point, they still remain open because we need that capacity because of the number of patients coming in.
You and I have spoken in the past of schemes to ensure patient flow, particularly where patients are fit enough to be discharged either back to home or into a care home. But there is no ongoing support for them, so they can't. They have to remain in those beds. Are these schemes that we talked about, are they working? And has it made a difference to the number of beds that are available to your patients?
So some parts of those schemes are working. So we've got a scheme called Home First, where patients go home and then they're assessed for their ongoing healthcare needs. And that seems to work very well. We're also working very well with other partners in terms of social services in particular, and we put an additional capacity, and we put an additional capacity in terms of nursing home places. So I think partners across Pennine Lancs are working well. They're trying to support the discharge and flow from hospital. Our detox, or delayed transfers of care, are generally lower than the rest of Lancashire and stand just over 4%. But it is a continuing pressure because you think about the pressures that we face as a society. We've got an ageing population. So every year the pressures get more. But we've got a population that's not necessarily ageing well. So we get lots of patients now with lots and lots and lots of comorbidities. And what we have to do, I think, is take a step back as a society and think about how we care for those patients in a setting other than an acute hospital, because it's not an appropriate place. Clearly, if you need specialist care, you need to be in hospital. But the majority of people's needs are more social care needs and more wider needs, and that's what we've got to provide in local settings.
Do you know what your current delayed discharge rate is?
It stands just over 4% at this point, which, as I say, is lower than the rest of Lancashire.
Like other trusts across the country, ELHT provides services to private patients. Can you tell us what the projected income from private work will be for the period 2017 to 18, and what happens to that money, if any? Okay,
so we actually get very, very little money at all through private patient income. It literally is, a few £100. It's minimal. I couldn't directly quote you a figure. I haven't got it to hand, but it's absolutely minimal. We do very, very little private patient work. But any income that we did receive or we would receive in future would be reinvested within the services that we run, the general NHS services that we run.
Let's talk briefly about something that we've touched on before again, and that's Phase 8 at Burnley. And for those that missed our previous blog, could you explain what Phase 8 will mean to patients and, of course, for staff at your Burnley General Teaching Hospital?
So this is brilliant news. So a couple of years ago, we put a business case in to knock down some of the old buildings on the Burnley site and to put up what we call Phase 8. And we've had that approved. So this is a £16 million capital investment. It replaces our outpatient facilities. It replaces our ophthalmic operating suites and our maxillofacial unit, and it really helps to tidy up the Burnley site. 'Cause for those listeners who know the Burnley site, it's got some brilliant physical stock, but it's also got some very, very old buildings. If you go on that site now, lots of the old buildings are now being knocked down and just rubble, and have been made way for this new facility. So it will really enhance services on the Burnley site, and it will make it a centre of excellence for many years to come.
I know where the money's coming from, you know where the money's coming from, but for patients that don't know the NHS, they may see all this building going on at Burnley, for instance, and think to themselves, the NHS is in trouble. Where has that money come from?
So that money we have to bid through to the Department of Health, and it's a very, very tight process to do so. And you have to have very rigorous business cases. So it's taken us over 2 years to actually get this money, to produce a business case, to go through the department, then to go through to the Treasury, to answer all the questions that they've had, and for it then to be signed off. But we've had formal notification now from the Treasury and the Department of Health, and we're receiving the funding for it. So it's brilliant news.
The local press have recently reported that bullying is still a problem at ELHT. Now, is that your experience? And what would you say to any of your staff who may experience problems at work?
So I don't recognise that, and if you look at our recent staff survey and also the staff survey for last year, we are one of the best performing trusts in the country in terms of what our staff are saying about their own organisation. However, one person being bullied is one person too many. Mm-hmm. So my door is always open for conversations and discussions, but we also have a freedom to speak up guardian, who is an independent person who members of staff, if they've got any concerns, can go and speak to completely in a way that's confidential. And if they want those messages then to come back to me or to go up to the trust board, the freedom to speak up guardian has direct access to me and to the board to relay concerns. So I would encourage any members of staff to do that, but also talk to your managers, talk to other people within the organisation. We have a culture, I hope, which is very open and honest. And if there is bullying taking place, then we need to stop it, and we need to develop a culture that's fair, that does hold people to account if they've done things wrong. So you would expect me to say that. We do get paid through the public purse, so we have to be accountable for what we do. So if we get things wrong, there has to be some accountability. However, that should never be about bullying, and it is totally unacceptable.
Some doctors go on treating dying patients beyond the point at which it provides benefit because of pressure from relatives or a fear of perceived failure. So says a report by the British Medical Association into end-of-life care. Now, people nearing the end of their lives should only receive medical intervention if it is appropriate and proportionate, according to the inquiry, which also criticised the NHS for not consistently delivering care to dying patients across the country. So, my question to you, Kevin, and it's a highly emotive subject, I know, but is hospital the right place for someone to end their days?
So, as you say, Russ, this is a very, very emotive subject, and there will be some patients and their relatives who wish to come into hospital to see out the last few hours of their life. They feel safer here, and we would never deny that. However, there is a large proportion of people at the end of life who die in hospital, who don't want to be in hospital, would rather be in their own home, would rather be elsewhere. And what we all have to do is to facilitate that and to support those patients to die in the most appropriate place. So we still get a number of patients who were transferred into the hospital in the very last hours of their life to die. Mm-hmm. And from conversations with family, etc., that if they had a choice, they wouldn't be in hospital. And it's those patients that I think, as a society, we're letting down. We should have the facilities in the home or in the nursing home or in the community so that those patients can spend the last few hours of their life where they wish to, surrounded by their family, not in an acute hospital. So that's what I'd say. But if a patient, and it's a patient's choice, to die in hospital, of course we would respect that as well.
Let's not beat around the bush here. I think a lot of it is about fear of pain and fear of not being in control of that situation. And as you rightly said, there isn't that care in the community at the moment. You and I are both of an age, me perhaps more than you, where dying at home was actually the norm. And I think that should come back.
I think that this fear of pain, I think, is right, and you do see that in in conversations with people and their families. But of course, pain relief doesn't have to be provided in hospital. It can be provided elsewhere. It can be provided external to hospital. And I just think we need to think much more carefully about end-of-life care and support patients and their families and respect their wishes at the end of life. I think, the form of somebody's death can have a massive impact on the rest of the life of families and loved ones. And it's appropriate that we try and get that right every time.
July this year sees the NHS celebrate 70 years of providing healthcare. So tell me how the Trust will get involved in those celebrations and how patients and their families can support the Trust.
So lots of various ways through the year. We are really pushing the 70th birthday of the NHS. I think it's a great institution, and it's really important that we should celebrate it. The biggest thing that we're doing is we've set up our new charity, ELHT and Me. It was launched a few weeks ago to great fanfare, and we're trying to get individuals, communities, business, commerce involved in local services to generate £1 million plus for local services, and it will go on supporting local services and really adding to the nice things as opposed to just basic care. So that's the main thing that we're doing, and we're badging everything else around that. But there'll be lots of stuff going on during the year. So there'll be a proper birthday celebration on the 5th of July, and there'll be cakes, there'll be banners, and we're trying to badge many of the things we do in this year under that banner of the 70th birthday.
ELHT are perhaps the area's biggest employer, with a staff base of almost 8,000. But for anyone thinking of taking up a career with the Trust, why should they? What makes your Trust stand out from the others in our area? And what can applicants expect if they join ELHT?
So I think what stands us alone is the culture that we are developing. It's not universal yet, but it will be. And that's a fair culture, a just culture, and a culture based on compassion, whereby we recognise that if staff are going to give of their best to patients, they have to be supported in all instances. So my philosophy is everything starts and finishes with staff, because if it does and we support staff, they can offer the best possible care to patients. So we have a good and developing reputation in ELHT. We've got a CQC rating of good. We generally hit most of our performance targets. Staff morale is high, performance targets are high, quality are high. It's just a lovely place to work. And more than anything else, it is supporting directly our local communities. So I think Pennine Lancs is a fabulous place. I think the health service generally is fabulous. And if you put the two together, then work for the NHS within Pennine Lancs. What better way to use a working career?
And what you've just said is very interesting and true, that a hospital is the heart of any community, so it goes hand in hand with that. This week there's been some good news about the NHS workers' pay, and in your recent blog you seem to be very supportive of the move. Could you tell us why?
Well, anything that I think improves morale and recognises the great work that NHS staff do has to be applauded. Now, it's true that for a number of years now, the NHS staff have had a pay cap where any awards have not been greater than 1%. You think about the way inflation is moving and the pressures that people have on household budgets, it has caused some distress to our staff. Therefore, any pay increase and pay award that's greater than that and recognises the work that the NHS staff do has to be applauded. So I think this is good news, and it will help with our recruitment.
And I'm sure patients and members of the public would thoroughly agree with that, and the staff too. Now, there's quite rightly a lot of talk in the hospital community at the moment about the up-and-coming Star Awards, where the Trust formally recognises its employees. The Staff Thank You and Recognition Awards, or Star Awards, can acknowledge and award any staff member, be they clinical or not. Nominations can come from colleagues, service users, or of course grateful patients and their families. This awards night is a fantastic way for the Trust to acknowledge the hard work and dedication of the staff, but for you, the Chief Executive. So how important is it that the Trust, and through the Trust you, continuously recognise the commitment and achievements of any member of staff?
I think it's absolutely necessary. I mean, the Star Awards are the best night of the year, bar none. They're a wonderfully joyous occasion, happy occasion, and where we really recognise the work and the extra mile that staff have gone. So the Star Awards in their own right are brilliant, but we recognise it in so many different ways during the year. Every month we have the Employee of the Month Award, where staff are recognised. I would hope through the blogs and the communications that we send out, we recognise the work that staff are doing. So we know, for instance, over the last 2 or 3 months, the pressure that staff working in ED have been under has been immense, and we've tried to support staff as best we can. So staff morale, supporting staff, recognising the work that staff do is fundamental to delivering long-term patient care.
Every month, I give you an opportunity to tell me your reasons to be cheerful. Now, this could be something connected to the Trust, or it might be an opportunity for you to share something personal with us. So, Kevin, what are your reasons to be cheerful this month?
This month, it has to be the amount of staff and the number of staff who received the flu vaccination. So if you go back a number of months, go back to September, October period, there was real anxiety in the NHS that we could see the worst outbreak of flu ever, and it could have been really detrimental. Now, it's not quite worked out that way, although there has been very significant spikes in flu. But one of the reasons it's not worked out that way is that staff themselves have been vaccinated. And I'm delighted to say that 92.3% of staff within ELHT have been vaccinated for the flu over the last few months. That's the biggest percentage in any trust in the whole country. Think about that, the biggest percentage of any trust in the whole country. It's magnificent, and testimony to how engaged staff are and how staff wish to support and continue to be at work to support their communities and patients.
And I know we spoke about that a few months ago, and you were hoping that you'd exceed last year's target.
Which we did. So last year we achieved 85%. This year we're 92.3%. So, gosh, next year 95%.
Things can only get better. Listen, we really enjoy our chats with you. On behalf of the patients of East Lancashire, Kevin McGee, thank you.
Thank you, Russ.